You turn off your mic. I'll go straight in. Um, so yeah, you've gone from the secure unit. Sorry, you just spoke there that you got sent back to the guy who you put a pen through his hand because he was a sex offender who grassed you up, and then from there you go to Medway. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. Medway Security Training Centre, which is like a riot. It was apparently at the time it was for the naughtiest 40 in Britain,
right?
Sort of 12 to 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
So this is obviously where I met Ruben.
Ruben. Yeah,
Yeah.
and obviously Ruben. Reading through the book, Ruben pricked my interest because Ruben's from Slough, but you never got his last name. This is what it said that you never got his last name. So when you moved, and you were quite good friends with Ruben, is that right?
Yeah, because again, there were 8 units and 5 young people on each unit. So he kind of became sort of my best mate in there, sort of thing. We got on well, and like I say, we're like my best mate. Spent most of my time with him while we were there, sort of thing. So, and he were also supposed to be the hardest in there as well. So he were a boxer, and he had twins at 14. He was like a grown man up to me, you know. I was like a little boy, and he was like a grown man.
Big, you get those people, didn't you? I remember people like that from school. Like I hung around with a lad from school, like outside of school. But yeah, he was the same. He was like a fully grown man by 14, and I was always the opposite. I looked at 14, I looked like 11 years old or something. You know what I mean? And then there were these guys that you do PE, and they'd be in there just bollock naked, you know what I mean? Just grown men. But I'm gonna try and find out who this Ruben is. I'm just gonna ask all my friends in Slough because obviously even though I grew up in the northeast, I'm from Slough, and all my family still live in Slough. So I'm intrigued, and I don't think it's going to be too hard to find somebody called Ruben who's hard and has got twins. So I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Medway wasn't a young offenders, and as far as I can tell, did you leave Medway and then hit the heroin, or have I got my notes wrong there?
No, I were already taking it at that point, but again, I didn't know about it. Just something I took with everybody else drinking drugs and all that kind of stuff. So, but Medway were run by Group 4 at that point. So the building were like circular, and then the 8 units, 5 young people on each unit, and then Group 4 there's benches in middle, so they'd sit there like the first response team. So if something were going on one of the units, staff on there would press the button, and then they'd just charge in, and they'd hit you with shields first, even though you were only young kids and stuff, and just they want restraints. You know, I'm trained in price and map for restraint and stuff, and none of them were restraints. They were assaults, and you knew if you got put under steps before you got took up to unit, you were going to get it quite bad. Right. And one of them, he hated me, I hated him. You know, and he would take enjoyment in winding me up and then restraining me, but it wasn't like restraints. Like say you'd have knees in back of your ears, fingers on and hands on your nose, in it up and twisted up in every type of position you can imagine.
I remember because I'm that little bit older than you. I remember Group 4 because they were always in the news for just being shambolic in everything that they did. As in, I remember they were always in the news regarding the treatment of prisoners, children, anybody in their care. They was always in the news for terrible treatment, and just not even that. I mean, they were just a shambles. Prisoners used to run on them all the time. Where it was basically just a bunch of civilians that were just given that job, and and that was it. A job interview. There's your job. That's what you do now. So, I remember Group 4 well. They don't exist anymore because they were so bad.
Yeah, well, Theresa May's husband's a director of them. So why do you think they were getting contracts?
You didn't know what a cold turkey was?
No, not until I hit young offenders.
Right. So you were, yeah. And how did that feel for you?
So after I left Medway and stuff again, it was like a riot there. It were just, if you Google it, you'll see how bad it was. It was bad when it first opened and stuff. And I was there when first 2 people jumped over the fence as well, climbed up using the knives and forks, a little green gridded fence. They got caught quite quickly, but they still managed to get over both of them. But yeah, so from there again, I actually won my appeal in Bradford Crown Court 9 days before my sentence was finished. I got an appeal through and I got it granted and then given a whole new sentence. And I'm thinking I might as well have just finished last fucking 9 days of my sentence because I got a whole new sentence for 9 days what I had left anyway.
Oh,
so again, I'd not learned. I'll come out. The crimes got more severe. The drugs, obviously, were taking heroin and crack, and we needed money to pay for that. So the offences were more serious. We were committing robberies daily, false imprisonments, and like I say, just travelling around and doing this and on news and in papers and all kinds of stuff. And then it kind of came to a head and got arrested for loads of offences like false imprisonments and knife point robberies and theft from person and all that kind of stuff. And it was a massive thing because I'd run off again from a home and I'd come back to my mum's and I'd gone up into the bedroom and had some sleep because it'd been rough few days, like hardly slept and stuff. And I went there and fell asleep and then I heard like my mum saying, "Oh, police are here." And I looked out the top window and there were like fucking 20 coppers around the house and it's like, fuck. I knew what was coming, obviously, to be fair, and I got arrested, and I think they'd arrested me for about 10 knife point robberies, false imprisonments, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, when you're in police station, I mean, me and my friends and my codees, we all had the same solicitor, so we all knew what everybody else was saying. We didn't have different solicitors; we all had the same one.
Can we just let people know that what a codee is, because we know, but some people listening won't have heard that term before, and TWOC as well, because I used that earlier. So codee, co-defendant, TWOC, taken without consent. Old school, that. Haven't heard those terms for a long time. Sorry, Glenn, yeah, just want to carry on.
Yeah, so we'd been arrested for all this stuff. Do you know what? Right, so, you know, we were causing a lot of pain. We're causing, you know, doing, you know, these robberies and knife point robberies and assaults and stuff to, you know, it were always men. It were never kind of kids or women or old people or all like that. It were always men because we thought there's no point robbing a young kid because they won't hardly have any money. We rob men because they're more likely to have more money and that type of stuff. And that's what we did, you know. It became normalised every day, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out for quite a while and stuff. And like I say, eventually we got caught, and rightly so, you know. And then kind of from there ended up doing 16 months in a Weatherby young offenders, which again, you know, I'm not proud of my offences at all, what I've done to people, especially now. You know, at the time I didn't really give a shit, but now as an adult, it doesn't sit right, you know, because I did a lot of things for people that didn't deserve that stuff, you know, and it don't always sit right, you know, and it shouldn't sit right either. Do you know what I mean? I have actually got a conscience now, and I think that's the difference as an adult and as a child. I didn't have a conscience. I didn't care because I didn't care about myself. So why am I going to care about somebody else? Well, I did what I did to survive.
Yeah, and also because it's not even about you didn't care for yourself, but for me as well, like I didn't care about consequences because I didn't think anybody cared about me. So do you know what I mean? Like there were consequences. It didn't matter. Nothing really mattered, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? And mine were nowhere near as serious as yours. But you know, I got into a lot of trouble, and I was out robbing. I was always burgling stuff, like. But it was the same thing. It was every day. Every day we would go out looking for stuff in cars. You know, we'd mug a couple of people. I've done that along the way, but mine was mainly burgling shops. Done a few houses and stuff, but again, just same thing. I'm sort of over it now, but there was a period in my life where I felt really guilty, really, like, you know, really sad that I'd done all those things. Now I'm sort of at a stage where I get pissed off that I ended up on a road towards those things because I don't think that I needed to. I can look back at my life, probably the same with you. Well, definitely reading your book. You can look back in your life and you can see the areas and sort of the moments where if people had done things differently, you wouldn't have ended up on that sort of really self-destructive trajectory. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and like I say, with the people I chose to surround myself with that were doing that stuff, and like I said earlier, you know, no one made me do that. I did that of my own free will, you know, because at the point of these robberies, I was part of, whereas at the beginning, I was trying to be part of. So I did other stuff and I went that extra bit further to be accepted, be part of. Whereas at this point, I was already part of and to be honest, a lot of time I instigated a lot of that stuff, you know, and I have to accept responsibility for that and accountability. You know, I did a lot of stuff to probably good people. I didn't deserve it, you know, but at the time, like I said, I didn't care about myself. So why am I going to care about somebody else?
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't, and which is very sad now, sitting as an adult, looking back on it, you know, it doesn't sit right, you know, because I did, like I've said a few times, I've done stuff to people that didn't deserve it, and it wasn't right, you know what I mean? And I did to get that sentence I got, you know, and I was told to expect a lot longer. So when I only got the sentence I got, I was really happy because I got told it was going to be almost double or triple of what I did actually get. So I was quite happy with that, you know. But
for me,
sorry,
go on, I was just saying, for when I started taking the heroin at 19, I was on the streets on and off for 25 years. From 14 to 19, I felt okay about the situations I was in where I was taking because the heroin weren't involved. Once I got into the addictions and into the my criminality got worse and worse. And on the streets, I seen going to jail or into a detox or something, especially jail, a fight. You know what I mean? So I used to set myself up sometimes, know what I was doing could get me caught, but know what I was doing would also put me somewhere for 3 weeks or maybe 3 months or 6 months. And that's like to look on, you know what I mean? Want to put yourself in that position in the first place. It's not right, you know what I mean? Because nothing else was working, nothing else was in place.
Cycle of insanity.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the last time you were in trouble, though, wasn't it? Is that when you sort of made a decision to just say, "That's it, I can't be doing this"?
Well, basically, so I served my sentence, and when I came out of there, well, before I got out, my social worker came to see me and said, "This is the last time we're seeing you now." So I got abandoned by social services, young offenders.
Right.
So from then on, it was my youth offending worker that came and seen me and picked me up. And I just said to him before I got out, "I don't want to go back to my mum's. That's the only place I don't want to go because it always breaks down, as it always did when I tried it brief points before that." And they didn't tell me. And when they picked me up, I'm like, "Well, where am I going?" And they're like, "We'll tell you when you get to office." So I had to get from Wetherby to Halifax without knowing where I was going. And then when I got there, they told me I'm going back to my mum's anyway. So it was, you know, I think they just didn't want me kicking off in car all the way back from Wetherby to Halifax before they told me. So that's why they waited. Obviously, with hindsight now, I can see that's why they did it. But it, again, went back to my mum's, lasted a couple of weeks, put in a bed and breakfast miles away from no money, no food, nothing. You know, this bed and breakfast wasn't a traditional bed and breakfast where you get full English in the morning. It had a little hole in the wall and they pass you some cereal and milk through it in the morning.
We know what bed and breakfast you're talking about. Like 100%. This is where we really can jump in. I mean, especially I can jump in and be like, I know exactly what you're talking about because, at 16, that was it. I was in a bed and breakfast in South Shields. And like you said, we called it a bed and breakfast. It wasn't a bed and breakfast. It was a bunch of pokey rooms.
Well, even a bed.
Yeah, in some dodgy landlord that either lived in there or it was so dodgy. Do you know what I mean? And you might get a bowl of cereal in the morning, and that's what they got to charge you your breakfast cash for. But I mean, that was my introduction to the adult world, and I wasn't at all prepared for it. And sink or swim, I sunk. But same with you. But I mean, did you get into any more trouble, or was sort
of? So I'd come out, and so I'd been in this bed and breakfast for about a week, and in this room there was a pair of curtains, a cupboard, and a bed. On a TV, none of that sort of stuff. And the only thing I had was a box of cornflakes, and I was having cornflakes with water. That was my only other meal other than the bowl of cereal in the morning. And my mental health deteriorated rapidly in there because I was miles away, no money, no food other than that. And my mental health had deteriorated other than going and seeing a youth offending team for supervision. And then, because my mental health had deteriorated quite badly, they put me into the psychiatric hospital where I was medicated. And at that point, they were kind of open wards, and I was put on with all these older people, and there were some really ill people there, and it were fucking pretty frightening, you know, intimidating, because I was still a young sort of 17, nearly 18-year-old kid, you know, and there's all these ill people, and, you know, and I was medicated, and like I did everywhere else, I waited until I got opportunity and fucking run off, like I did everywhere. And then after a while, I handed myself in and stuff, and then they told me I'm going to a hostel. So from there, I went to a hostel. But my youth offending worker put me onto a project called Project Challenge in Halifax, and it was a 6-month course. You do improvised rescues, first aid, and all that kind of stuff. And if you made it to end its 6-month course, you got to go on kind of this exhibition thing. And there were 18 of us that started it, and only 3 of us finished it. So I got, at the end of that, I got to go to Italy and walk across the Alta Via 1 in Dolomites for 16 days. So I got, at that point, I got my first passport, first time I've been out of country. You know, the difference of that 6-month course is people didn't give up on me. It was 3 days a week, but I could go in there 5 days a week, and they wouldn't ask me to leave or tell me to leave. They'd make me a drink, and I felt part of, and that was the start of kind of turning it around for me.
I did,
that was vital.
Yeah, I did something really, really similar. When I was 18, 19, I got involved in the Fairbridge Trust, which was the same thing. It was like, it was a residential course. Yeah, you've done it as well. It was a residential course. It was lots of team building. It was rock climbing, abseiling. And then because I did well there, they then put me in touch with Rally International, which was a similar sort of thing. It was a long sort of selection process, and not everybody finished it and started it. And then I went abroad. I went to Namibia in West Africa to volunteer for 3 months. It was one of them things that at the time I did it through probation. It's one of them things that picks up bad press because they say, oh, look, they're sending criminals, they're rewarding criminals with but, that changed my life. That is when I can pinpoint at 21 years old, I went to Africa and I came back with a completely different view on the world and a different view on what I wanted to be and where I wanted to go in life. It didn't happen overnight, but my circle of friends changed. I all of a sudden, the same thing, I'd never had a passport before, I'd never been abroad before. All of a sudden, I was aware there was a big, big world out there that I wanted to sort of be part of. And I think when I came back from Rally International, I got arrested one more time, and that was when I sat in the cells. I got arrested for punching a bus driver drunk. You'll know the sort of crazy routine: drunk, getting into an argument, punch a bus driver. Somebody else got involved. I punched him. He turned out to be a civil servant, which looked really bad in court. And I remember just thinking, what are you doing with your life here? Like, you know what I mean? You've just come back from Africa, kind of thing. What are you going to do with your life here? I've never been in trouble since. So yeah, I get it. Those little things that people sort of tar with this brush that people are being rewarded for bad behavior, that changed my life. So it was completely the right thing for me. And it sounds like it was a similar thing for you as well.
Sorry, what
was that, Ellen?
No, it took me a hell of a lot longer than that. To start sorting my shit out. I'm 43 now, and it was 38. I started turning around. You know,
we'll get there.
We do. Don't take mine as an example.
Where was it you went, Ben? Where was it you went? Italy?
Italy. I walked across Alta Via 1 in Dolomites, and then also went to Venice and Treviso. So it were probably one of the best experiences I've ever had, because you were literally days and days away from anyone and anything in the middle of nowhere. It were amazing. But I mean, I'd like to say that were kind of end of my troubles. But I mean, when I got sentenced to young offenders, my best mate at that point, he was already 18, so he got sentenced as an adult. So his sentence was like double mine, and he was seen as the leader type thing. But at this point, I'd moved on, and my son was born in 2002 in November, and he was born at 11:23, and I went outside afternoon, and there were a few of my friends there who I'd grown up with and stuff. I'm like, why are you here, sort of thing, and they're like, oh, Matthew's come out of prison, and he'd come out and he'd gone straight to these flats, injected heroin. Instead of ringing an ambulance, he took his coat off him and £40 what he got released with from prison, and dragged him to the top of the stairs and left him to die. So within a few hours of my son being born, my best mate were dead, and I'd not even seen him anyway. you know, so I was happy and proud inside my son's born, but then my best mate's dead, which again affected my mental health massively. And sort of from there, kind of just coasted through life, sort of thing, in and out of psychiatric hospitals and that kind of stuff. And, you know, I don't, you know, I can't sit here honestly and put my hand up and say I haven't committed any more offences. I just didn't get caught for any more offences. You know, that's been brutally honest. You do bits and bats and stuff like that, but you know, I just didn't get caught for that. Whereas if I had, then I'd have had more convictions, but I didn't. So I kind of don't really want to speak about that.
Yeah, cool.
We don't want to get in any more trouble. When was it that you sort of just you moved? What are you doing now? Because I know that you got your book, obviously. How did that come about? Actually, like when did that come about? Did you just decide to write a book, or did somebody get in touch with you? Or
Right. So I've been in mental health hospitals and doing bits and bats, and basically I'd moved away from an house where I was at, what were a bit dodgy, and thought, you know, I can't fucking carry on like this. And I moved away from it, started changing friends and stuff like that. And someone said to me, why don't you write a book? I'm like, fucking hell, I'm computer illiterate. I've got no GCSEs whatsoever. Fucking my spelling, punctuation and grammar's fucking appalling. The only thing I'd ever wrote were a two-sided piece of paper from a fucking young offenders. How am I going to write a book on a computer that I don't even know how to use? That was my introduction to writing a book. But with the persistence and resilience and tenacity and being resourceful, I sat there for about 9 months on this old tower computer trying to fucking type this book up and stuff. I didn't even know how to put it into chapters or paragraphs. You know what I mean? It was just like one long fucking thing. And then I was speaking to some people because I joined Twitter at that point, thinking someone had said you can come to Derbyshire and speak to kids in this kids zone with staff, and one of the staff there were also an assistant professor at Nottingham University, so offered to edit my book and put it into chapters and all that kind of stuff, which I'm obviously massively grateful for now. So I self-published it in 2011, and then it got 25 5-star reviews. So from there, kind of a bit more working and looking for a publisher, and got help, you know, from this couple that were really good to me and stuff. And then ended up getting a publishing deal with Waterside Press for my book, which is not bad for the first thing I'd ever wrote properly, which I didn't really write all properly myself anyway, because like I say, it wasn't even bloody paragraphs and chapters, do you know what I mean? So kind of it were a bit of an achievement. And at the same time, I've been applying for jobs, and I think I'd sent about 200 job applications up and stuff, and I got one reply saying you don't meet our criteria, which is not a great response out of all that. And but once my book was published, that were it. It was kind of like a business card into social care, social work, criminology, social policy. So on back of that, people want to come to universities and give lectures and presentations, and I kind of did all that sort of stuff as well. And then because I'd done really well in that time, I got offered to go on a European project with the National Voice and British Association of Adoption and Fostering, and it were trying to get a best practice model for all 28 European countries at the time. And so I got to travel to other countries and work with leading experts, and they came here and kind of stuff. And because I was so successful at it, they asked me to pick some young people to do a focus group with. So, and this was just in London. So I said, well, I want to do one there and one in Manchester, you know, because everything's always London and never really North gets forgot about. So we had one in Manchester, which were one of kind of the things I required to do it, and to choose the young people myself, not have all these good kids or well-behaved kids come in. I want a mixture of every kind of kid there was, and I chose the kids myself, and again that was really productive and successful. So on back of that, the European experts asked if I'd pick a few young people to come to London, to London University, and sit on a panel and answer questions from the European experts that would come in, and they would ask them questions and vice versa. And it turned out, this was December 2013, 3 young people that I was working with all lived in residential care. Well, that same day, the new legislation was being brought in that kids in foster care can stay put till 21. Well, all these kids were in residential care, and they're like, well, what about us? And they were visibly upset, angry, and pissed off because it didn't include them. And I remember one of them saying, I'd love to stay in my own till I'm 21. And I'm like, I'll do what I can, but realistically, I didn't even know what I could do at that point. And I rung my mentor a bit before, and he'd been a social worker for 39 years at that point. 39 years of the 40 years that social work had been about.
Right.
So they were no better really to ask. So from there, we had a conversation, and it led to a national campaign being formed called Every Child Leaving Care Matters, which I'm the founder, a founding member and the vice chair of. And originally there were about 6 of us that started it, and there's only 2 of us that have remained for the full duration, which is the guy that I rung to ask, who is my mentor, and he's been a bit like my dad as well, really, for a decade. You know, like, he's kind of a person, if I wanted a father or father figure, I wish it'd be someone like him, you know what I mean? And he's guided me and learned me so much, you know. And at the time, he was the CEO of a big residential care and foster care organisation. So again, he had a lot of experience and stuff like that, and he took me under his wing, do you know what I mean? And used to go stay at his house and still do. And yeah, he's guided me and mentored me in the right place. And he's the chair of the campaign as well, called Ed Nixon, top guy. Like I say, he's been like my dad and my mentor and my friend. And, you know, that one person, the positive role model I needed as an adult, which I wish I'd have had as a kid, which I didn't. Obviously, my role models were very different as a kid than they are now. You know, the people I look up to these days, they're not gangsters and all these so-called people. It's hard-working people that are social workers that do a hard and tough job. Do you know what I mean? They're the ones that inspire me, and I want to follow now. And so from there, the campaign formed. So in 2015, after a couple of years of campaigning, I got invited to Buckingham Palace for services to children, young people, and families, which again is, in my head, I'm thinking, who the fuck's done risk assessment for this? Like, inviting me to Buckingham Palace. Do they know about all these knife-point robberies and false imprisonments and all this kind of stuff, you know? And, you know, my life's been more surreal when I've not been on drugs than when I've been on drugs.
Yeah.
You know, I've given evidence at select committees. You know, I've given evidence at select committees in Parliament. I've spoken in Parliament many times. I've been to Whitehall, House of Lords, Buckingham Palace. You know, giving evidence at select committees, it's like, again, very surreal. How am I here with all these politicians and then go to Buckingham Palace and being a matter of feet away from Queen and stuff? And in my head, I'm thinking, who's done risk assessment for this? I didn't even get search going in. Yeah. You know, and then when I got there, I was expecting all this nice food, and then I got a fucking cucumber sandwich with mint or something, and it was disgusting, and I couldn't spit it out. It was awful, awful, awful. But yeah, my life's been very surreal, and you know, within that.
Also lived experience, mate. You know what I mean? That's why you're the best person for that.
Yeah, totally. Your past becomes your CV suddenly. Do you know what I mean? It goes from, you've got to hide your past, all of a sudden, with the right sort of, once you've released your book and you're being very honest about it, your past becomes your CV, and people suddenly see you as qualified to talk about actual issues that are in the country. So, I mean, yeah, it's a mega story, really inspirational. Thank you for coming on.